The fusion core hummed through the deck plating beneath Commander Conrad's boots, a steady vibration. He had stopped noticing it months ago. He stood at his station on Shardfall Station. His fingers scrolled through duty logs, his other hand rubbed his temple. The Korth homeworld filled the viewport to his left. A blue-white sphere rotated slowly through the black. Beautiful, cold, unblinking. The priority alert chimed from his console. Conrad frowned at the classification marker. Gold crest. Fleet Command Direct. His eyes only. He opened it standing. The message was 6 lines long. He read it once. Then he read it again. The words did not change. They never did. Resource extraction quotas from the Korth homeworld would increase by 40% effective immediately. No justification. No context. A single sentence at the bottom read, "This order supersedes all prior agreements." Conrad stared at the screen. The hum of the core seemed louder suddenly, or perhaps everything else had gone quiet. He rolled his shoulders, a slow, deliberate motion, settling the weight. Reyes sat at the auxiliary console 20 feet away. She scrolled through interview transcripts. Her fingers tapped a restless rhythm against the metal edge of her workstation. Conrad watched her for a moment, small and quick, restless hands, the sharpest mind on this station. She used it to pry open the thoughts of creatures made of light and crystal. Conrad said, "Doctor, come here, please." His voice was flat, controlled. Reyes looked up. She closed the transcript and crossed to his station in 4 quick steps. Her eyes found the gold crest on his screen. Then they found his face. He said, "How are the Korth handling current extraction levels?" He kept his tone even. Reyes tapped her thigh twice before she answered. Her standard tell. She said the collective is showing stress indicators. They use a term for it. Vexfane. It translates roughly to systems overload, not biological stress. Structural, like a building under too much weight. Conrad said, "What would a 40% increase do?" He watched her closely. Reyes went still. Her hand stopped mid-tap. She said, "Commander, that would exceed their tolerance curve. I can show you the projection models if you want. But the short version is that the collective would begin experiencing systemic fractures within 6 standard weeks. Not physical, neural. They process collective identity through shared energy resonance. Push them past the limit and that resonance starts to break down." Conrad said nothing. He turned back to his console and began drafting a reply. He requested clarification. He warned that increased extraction may destabilize the occupation. He cited the Vexfane projections. He submitted it and waited. 3 hours. The reply came back as he reviewed the evening supply manifest. His console chimed. He opened it standing, just like the first one. The order was confirmed. No adjustments would be made. The final line read, "Compliance is expected within the cycle." Conrad stared at the screen. The words did not swim or blur. They stayed exactly where they were, sharp and final and impossible to unsee. He did not share the content with his officers. He closed the message and turned back to the supply manifest. His shoulders did not unroll. Kade's voice came from the door, low and flat, no urgency in it yet. The sergeant said, "Commander, we have a disturbance in the lower residential sector." He spoke without inflection. Conrad looked up. Kade stood by the main door, broad-shouldered, scarred jaw, watching everything the way he always watched everything. Conrad said, "Define disturbance." He kept his voice level. Kade said, "A group of Korth civilians is blocking the main transport corridor on level 7. They are not violent. They are not making demands. They are standing still and refusing to move." He reported the facts. Reyes moved closer. She said, "That does not fit the profile. Korth do not stage passive blockades. It is not in their behavioral repertoire." Her tone was quick, analytical. Conrad said, "Show me." He gestured at the main display. Kade tapped his wrist console. The main display shifted. A drone feed filled the screen. Gray corridor, pale light, and Korth, at least 40 of them, crystalline bodies packed into a narrow space. Their facets caught the overhead light and scattered it in slow pulses. They stood in formation, deliberate, silent. Then Conrad saw it. A juvenile near the center of the group, smaller than the adults, softer and more translucent. Its crystal structure was still growing. Incomplete facets glowed with a dimmer inner light. The juvenile stood beside an adult. It held one of the adult's arm-like extensions with its own smaller limbs. The adult did not move. The juvenile did not let go. Conrad stared at the feed. The Korth were not blocking the corridor as a protest. They were not making a statement. They were protecting. The juvenile was the center of the formation. Every adult body was positioned between that small, translucent shape and the corridor entrance. He had never seen Korth do anything like this. It did not fit the analytical profile. It did not fit anything the collective had ever reported about their social structures. They were transactional. They were analytical. They did not form protective bonds with their young the way humans did. Or they did, and nobody had ever thought to ask. Conrad said, pull the patrol back. Find another route to the upper sectors. He gave the order without hesitation. Kade said, sir, the patrol is already in position. They can clear the corridor in under a minute. His voice was steady, questioning. Conrad said, I did not ask what they can do. I gave you an order, pull them back. His tone hardened. Kade held his gaze for a long moment. Then he nodded once and tapped his wrist console. Reyes said, Commander, that was the right call. Her voice was soft. Conrad said it was the logical call. There is no tactical advantage in provoking a civilian population that has done nothing but stand still. He turned back to the drone feed. Reyes said nothing. She did not need to. The low hum of the fusion core filled the silence. The blue-white world turned below them. Conrad watched the juvenile on the drone feed. The small crystalline shape pressed close to the adult beside it. He wondered what the collective called that behavior. He wondered if they had a word for it at all. His console chimed again. Conrad looked down. The message flag was not gold, it was black. Anonymous routing. 17 relay stations, no sender identification. He opened it standing. The message contained a single line of text. It was written in old colonial code, a cipher he had not seen since his training days. The translation sat in his head before he had finished reading the characters. The collective knows about the annexes. Conrad stared at the screen. The words did not blur or soften. They sat exactly where they were, 8 words, 1 meaning. He said nothing. He closed the message. He did not flag it for investigation. He did not forward it to Reyes. He deleted it. The screen went clean and empty. His hands were steady when he did it. His shoulders did not unroll. The yellow light caught the edges of Azurx's crystalline surface. It scattered into 1,000 tiny patterns on the wall. The air was thin, not painful but noticeable. A constant reminder that this station was built for humans. Reyes sat across the table. Her fingers tapped against her thigh. A restless rhythm Azurx had catalogued over the past weeks. Focus. The recording device between them smelled of heated plastic and ozone. A small machine, inefficient, but humans trusted records. Reyes leaned forward. She said the residential sector. 40 Korth adults formed a blockade across Transport Corridor 7. No verbal demand, no negotiation. Why? Her voice was sharp, curious. Azurx cycled its 7 arms through a holding pattern. The question was expected. The answer was simple. It said the collective's analytical models predicted verbal complaints would be ignored. Your species responds to physical presence. The blockade forced a response. Its tone was flat, clinical. Reyes's fingers stopped tapping. She said, you modeled our behavior. Azurx said, we model everything. It is how we navigate uncertainty. It kept its voice even. Reyes nodded slowly. She looked at the recording device, then back at Azurx. She said there was a juvenile in the formation, center position, held by an adult. Why was the juvenile there? Azurx hesitated, a small hesitation, barely measurable, but Reyes caught it, her eyes narrowed. Azurx processed the question. The collective's logs showed the juvenile had not been placed. The juvenile had moved independently. The adults had adjusted their positions to accommodate. This was not standard Korth social behavior. This was not within any known parameter. It said the juvenile was not placed. It chose to stand there. The adults allowed it. Reyes leaned forward. She said, why? Azurx had no answer. The collective's models had failed. The juvenile had acted outside predicted boundaries. This was a gap, a void in understanding. The failure churned through Azurx's core like a slow vibration. It said, I do not know. Its voice was quiet, uncertain. The words felt wrong. Korth did not say they did not know. Korth modeled. Korth predicted. Korth understood. Rin stepped forward from the corner. The juvenile moved with a soft clatter of crystal on deck plating. Its smaller form caught the yellow light and scattered it in gentler patterns. Rin made a sound, a chime, like crystal wind chimes stirred by a breeze, a harmonic sequence, a simple statement. Reyes's head tilted. She did not understand. Azurx understood perfectly. Rin had said, the big one with the scar was afraid. I stayed so he would not be alone. Azurx processed the statement for 3 seconds. 3 seconds, an eternity for Korth cognition. The vibration in its core grew stronger. A human had been afraid. A Korth juvenile had perceived that fear. The juvenile had responded with the equivalent of social bonding behavior, proximity maintenance, contact preservation. This was not interspecies propriety. This was not diplomatic protocol. This was family. The humans on Shardfall Station had not adopted Rin. Rin had adopted them. Ajax's 7 arms stopped cycling. They hung still, a sign of deep processing. Reyes noticed that too. She said, "What did it say?" Her voice was soft. Ajax considered lying. The thought flickered and dissolved. Korth did not lie. Korth did not need to lie. It said, Rin said Sergeant Kade was afraid. Rin stayed so Kade would not be alone. Reyes's face changed. The muscles around her mouth softened. Her eyes moved toward Rin, then back to Ajax. She did not speak for a long moment. She said, "That's not standard Korth behavior." Ajax said no. She said, "You don't bond with other species." Ajax said, "We do not bond, we observe, we analyze. We cooperate within established parameters." Its voice was flat. Reyes tapped her thigh again. She said, "But Rin is bonding." Ajax said nothing. The silence stretched. The yellow light shifted as the station rotated on its axis. Rin made another sound, a single chime, a question. Reyes looked at the juvenile. She said, "What did it say?" Ajax said, "Rin asked if you are angry." Reyes shook her head. She said, "No, I'm not angry, I'm surprised." Her voice was gentle. Ajax processed the word, surprise, a human emotion. Dr. Reyes had not expected this. The collective had not expected this. No one had expected this. The interview concluded 20 minutes later. Reyes collected her recording device. She paused at the door and looked back at Rin. She did not say anything. She did not need to. Rin took a step toward her. Reyes smiled, a small expression, a barely perceptible movement of facial muscles, but Ajax catalogued it. She left. Ajax stood in the yellow light for a long time. Rin remained in the corner. The juvenile did not understand what had happened. It only understood it had done something right. Ajax returned to its quarters. The room was small, cold, optimized for Korth biology. The light was dim, calibrated to reflective surfaces. Ajax stood in the center and opened a secure channel to the shadow network. The transmission crackled. A voice emerged, flat, without warmth. "Vexus." Vexus said, "Report." The word was a command. Ajax spoke carefully. It said, "The anomaly has been identified. A Korth juvenile has formed a social bond with human personnel. The bonding is mutual. Dr. Isabel Reyes and Sergeant Theron Kade are primary attachment figures. The bond is not within predicted parameters." Silence, then Vexus's voice, colder than before. Vexus said, "The anomaly is not the problem. The bond is. We will remove the variable." Ajax did not reply. It did not need to. It knew what Vexus meant. The variable was Rin. The channel closed. The room went silent. Ajax stared at the wall. The yellow light from the station corridors bled through the crack beneath the door. Ajax had no framework for what it felt. The collective had no word for the pressure building in its core. It was not anger. It was not concern. It was something older and sharper. Something that felt like the first crack in a crystal under steady pressure. Ajax lifted one arm and pressed it against the wall. The metal was cold. The vibration of the station's fusion core hummed through the surface. The variable was Rin, and Ajax had just delivered that information to Vexus. The corridor smelled of overheated wiring and metal dust. Sergeant Theron Kade crouched beside the open maintenance panel. His headlamp cut a white cone into the exposed conduits. The power conduit had failed during the night shift. Standard diagnostics said it was a cascading surge from the station's fusion core. Kade had seen enough surges to know this was something else. The wires were clean, no scorch marks, no melt damage. Someone had cut the power deliberately. Rin stood beside him, close enough that its crystal surface caught the light and scattered it across the corridor walls in soft blue fragments. The juvenile watched Kade's hands work. It did not speak. It rarely did during repairs, but it stayed. Every time Kade opened a panel, Rin appeared within minutes. Kade did not tell it to leave. He traced the wire bundle with his fingers, following the line back to a junction box. The cut was precise, a blade, not a surge. He filed the information silently and began splicing the connection. Rin made a sound, a low harmonic that vibrated through the deck plating. Kade did not look up. He knew the sound. Rin was about to ask a question. The juvenile said, "Why do you fix what is broken?" Its voice came through the translator implant in Kade's ear. The Korth syntax rearranged into something human-readable. But Kade had learned to read the intent behind the words, the pulses of light through Rin's core, the shift in its crystal geometry. The question was not about the conduit. Kade considered his answer. He finished the splice and tested the connection. The panel light flickered green, he said, because it needs fixing. He said it like the answer was obvious, because to him it was. Rin's crystal structure shifted. The light inside it pulsed faster, then settled into a steady glow. It made the harmonic sound again, the one that meant understanding. Kade reached for the panel cover. His fingers were thick and scarred. The screws were small. He worked them into place with the patience of someone who had learned that rushing led to mistakes. Footsteps echoed from the far end of the corridor. Kade recognized the gate, quick, irregular, always in a hurry. Dr. Isabel Reyes rounded the corner and stopped. She was carrying her datapad, but she was not looking at it. She was looking at Rin standing beside Kade. She watched them for a long moment. Her restless hands went still. She said, "You have a guest." Her voice was light, curious. Kade did not look up. He said, "She stays." His tone was firm. Reyes walked closer. The datapad screen showed a list of names. She tapped it against her thigh 3 times before she spoke again. She said, "There is a problem." Kade tightened the last screw. He stood up slowly, rolling his shoulders. The movement was deliberate, like Conrad's, but heavier. He wiped his hands on his uniform pants. He said, "What kind of problem?" His voice was low. Reyes held up the datapad. She said, "The Shadow Network has been asking questions about the lower deck schedule. Your name came up, and the maintenance rotations. They want to know when the corridors are empty." Kade's jaw tightened. He said, "Who asked?" Reyes paused. She said, "Someone overheard a name. Vexus." Kade did not know the name. He turned to look at Rin. The juvenile's crystal pulses had accelerated. The light inside it flickered, unstable. Rin spoke. Its voice was softer than before. The translator implant lagged, then delivered the words. Rin said, "Vexus is one who made the collective." Kade went still. He said, "Made it." Rin's crystals hummed. The sound was lower than before, something like fear, if Korth felt fear. Rin said, "Vexus shaped the patterns. Vexus holds the memory of the collective before the humans came." It paused. Its light dimmed. It said, "Vexus does not approve of my presence here. Vexus wants the humans gone." Reyes drew a sharp breath. Kade crouched down. He lowered himself until he was at eye level with Rin. The juvenile's crystal surface was warm in the corridor's cold air. Fragments of light reflected off Kade's face. Painting his scarred jaw in soft blue, he looked directly into Rin's core. He said, "We are not going anywhere." His voice was low, steady, no hesitation. He said, "And you are staying with us." Rin's crystal structure shifted. It was not a gradual change. It was sudden and visible. The light inside the juvenile's core reorganized itself. New patterns emerged. The pulses became synchronized with something Kade could not name. Reyes watched it happen. Her datapad hung forgotten at her side. She said, "There is no word for this." Her voice was barely a whisper. She said, in Korth cognition, "There is no framework for a juvenile choosing family outside its species." Kade did not look away from Rin. He said, "Doesn't need a word." Reyes said, "The collective will see this as a threat." Kade said, "Let them." The red alert klaxon shattered the silence. It came from the command deck, a high-pitched wail that pulsed through the station's structure. The corridor lights flickered. Rin's crystals flashed white in alarm. Kade's earpiece crackled. Commander Conrad's voice came through, tight and clipped. Conrad said, "Kade, we have a problem." Kade straightened. He touched his earpiece. He said, "Go ahead, sir." His voice was calm. Conrad said, "The Shadow Network just locked out our navigation systems. They took control of the stellar capacitor feed. The station is drifting toward the homeworld's gravity well. We have 12 minutes before we hit atmosphere." Kade's hand dropped to his sidearm. He looked at Rin. The juvenile's light pulses were erratic, broken. The steady glow from a moment ago was gone. Rin spoke. Its voice was hollow. It said, "Vexus is here." The words hit Kade like a physical blow. He turned to Reyes. Her face was pale. She had one hand pressed against the corridor wall, steadying herself. She said, "Vexus is on the station. Rin just told us, didn't it?" Kade nodded. He did not look at the juvenile. He looked at the open panel, the clean cut on the wires, the questions about corridor schedules, the timing. Vexus had been planning this for days. Kade's voice when he spoke was quiet, controlled. The voice of a man who had learned that shouting solved nothing. He said, "Doc, get Rin to the command deck. Tell Conrad I am hunting." Reyes grabbed Rin's arm. The juvenile's crystal surface was cold against her skin. The contact was strange, unfamiliar, but Rin did not resist. She said, "What are you going to do?" Kade drew the sidearm, checked the charge, slid it back into the holster. He said, "I am going to find Vexus." He turned and walked down the corridor. His boots were heavy on the deck plating. The red klaxon pulsed around him. Behind him, Rin's light began to steady. The juvenile watched Kade's back disappear into the shadows. Rin made a sound. It was not language, it was something older. Reyes heard it. She understood it without a translator, a juvenile calling for its protector. The command deck swam in red light. Conrad gripped the console edge. He felt the vibration through his palms. The fusion core's hum had shifted, a wavering note that did not belong. The main display showed the Korth homeworld drifting, slowly, steadily. The station was no longer holding position. Kade hit the deck at a run. His weapon was drawn. His eyes swept the room before settling on Conrad. Reyes followed a step behind. Her datapad was gone. She had her medical kit strap wrapped around her fist instead. Conrad did not waste time. He hit the diagnostic sequence with his thumb. The display flickered. Data streamed across the left panel in a cascade of green text. The navigation array was responding to external commands, not from fleet, not from ground control, from inside the station's own network. Conrad read the routing path twice. The commands originated from a node buried in the treaty hardware, the hardware that connected the station to the Korth Collective's communication grid. The hardware no one had thought to check because the treaty was signed in good faith. This was an inside job. He straightened, his shoulders rolled once. The decision settled. He turned to Azurx. The crystalline diplomat stood near the secondary console. Its 7-faceted arms were still. Light pulsed through its core at a speed Conrad had never seen before. Azurx spoke. Its voice was flat, but the crystal pulse was not. It said, "This is Vexus." The Shadow Network planted a backdoor in the original treaty hardware. They planned for this contingency years ago. Conrad turned. He stared at Azurx. The red light caught Azurx's facets and scattered across the deck in sharp fragments. He said, "You knew about the backdoor." Azurx said yes. Conrad said, "Did you know it was still active?" Azurx said yes. Conrad's face did not change. He had been in command long enough to know that anger was a delay. He needed information. He said, "Why are you telling me now?" Azurx did not answer immediately. Its crystal pulse slowed. Then it turned, not toward Conrad, toward Kade, then past him toward the corridor beyond the command deck door. Rin stood there, just out of sight. Its small crystalline form cast a faint blue glow against the bulkhead. Azurx said the collective's models did not account for this. "For family, I'm accounting for it now." Its voice was quiet, steady. Conrad held Azurx's gaze for one heartbeat. Then he turned to Kade. He said, "Find Vexus. Secure it. Use lethal force if the situation requires it." He gave the order without hesitation. Kade did not nod. He did not speak. He turned and left the deck at a run. Reyes went with him. Her boots hit the deck plating hard. The door closed behind them. The station's stabilizers failed. The deck tilted, 3 degrees, maybe more. Conrad's hand slipped on the console edge. He caught himself, braced his legs, felt his stomach shift with the angle. Azurx did not move. Its crystalline base anchored it to the floor. The light through its core had not slowed. The Korth homeworld slid further out of the viewport. Conrad watched it go. The planet was a blue-white crescent against the black. It had been centered in the display for 3 years. Now it was leaving. He turned back to Azurx. He said, "Why is the collective doing this?" Azurx's crystal pulse flickered. A pause that lasted longer than any silence Conrad had heard from a Korth. It said, "Because you are winning." Conrad waited. Azurx said, "The collective cannot predict you. It cannot control you. Your bond with our juveniles is a weapon you do not even know you are using. The Shadow Network would rather destroy the occupation than admit humans are beyond their models." Conrad stared at the crystalline being. The words settled into him like cold water. The occupation was never about resources, it was a test. And humanity had passed in a way the collective could not accept. He looked at the main display. The diagnostic showed the station was losing altitude, slowly. The navigation node was still under external control. Vexus had the helm. Azurx said, "Your family bonds are your weakness. That is what Vexus believes. It will attempt to prove this." Its voice was flat again. Conrad's jaw tightened. He said, "Kade will find the child before Vexus does." Azurx's crystal pulse did not change. It said, "Your certainty is not shared by my models." Conrad said, "Your models don't know Kade." The air shifted. The fusion core's hum dropped an octave. The deck tilted another degree. Conrad grabbed the console edge and held on. The main display flashed. A new message appeared. It was not from Fleet. It was not from Diagnostics. It was a direct transmission from an internal node. The text was in standard. One line, "Your family bonds are your weakness. Watch what happens when I remove the child." Conrad's blood went cold. He did not breathe for a full second. Kade was already gone. Rin was alone in the corridor. Vexus had the station's network. It knew where everyone was. He hit the emergency comm. He said, Kade, Vexus is targeting Rin. Move faster. His voice was tight. No reply. The comm was still active. Kade was running. Conrad turned to the secondary console. He pulled up the station's internal map. Rin's locator signal blinked green in the maintenance corridor near Section 7. Kade's signal was 4 sections behind and closing. Vexus's signal was not visible. It had access to the network. It would have hidden its own location. Conrad activated the station's lockdown protocol. Bulkhead doors slammed shut across every major corridor. He isolated Section 7. He sealed the maintenance tunnel. The system accepted the commands, then rejected them. A window opened on his console, a single line of text. You cannot lock me out. I built the network. Conrad stared at the words. Then he looked at Azurx. He said, you built the network. Azurx's crystal pulse was steady now. It said the collective built the network. I was part of the collective. I am still part of the collective, but I am no longer aligned with its goals. Conrad said, that doesn't help me right now. Azurx said, no, it does not. The deck tilted again. The fusion core hum rose to a pitch that hurt Conrad's teeth. The station was losing stability faster now. He looked at the internal map. Rin's signal was still in Section 7, but something else was moving through the maintenance tunnels. A signal he did not recognize. It was heading directly toward Rin. Conrad hit the emergency comm again. He said, Kade, it's already there. It's in the tunnels. Static, then Kade's voice. Flat, controlled. He said, I see it. The line went dead. Conrad stood on the tilted deck. The red light washed over everything. Azurx stood beside him, silent, watching. The Korth homeworld had nearly disappeared from the viewport. Conrad's hands were still gripping the console. His knuckles were white. He could feel the vibration of the failing fusion core through the deck plates. He could not reach Kade. He could not reach Rin. The only thing he could do was stand here and wait. The station's artificial gravity flickered. Conrad's stomach dropped as the deck tipped further. He caught himself on the console edge. The metal bit into his palms. The main display flashed, a new message from Vexus. It was a single image, a view from a maintenance corridor. A small crystalline form stood alone in the center of the frame. Blue light pulsed through its growing facets. Rin. The image showed a second figure emerging from the shadows behind the child. A Korth, dark crystal, fractured surfaces that scattered the light unevenly. Vexus. The message beneath the image read, watch. The maintenance sector was cold, not the cold of temperature. Vexus had no frame for that, but the cold of stillness. Zero gravity, no air movement, no vibration through the deck plates. Only the emergency strips casting thin blue light across drifting debris. Vexus floated near the control panel. Its 7 arms moved in precise sequence. Each command entered the station's navigation system. Each command sealed another layer of control. The gravity would not return until Vexus permitted it. The life support would follow the same pattern. The humans believed they controlled this station. They had never understood how deeply the shadow network had embedded itself. Rin pressed against the far bulkhead. Its juvenile crystal structure pulsed with rapid light. Panic. The child could not move in zero gravity. Its small arms pushed against empty air. It went nowhere. Vexus completed the final sequence. The panel went dark. No work remained. It turned to face Rin. Vexus spoke in the Korth language, sharp harmonics that cut through the silent space. It said, you are a contaminant. Rin's pulses quickened, too fast for coherent speech. The child could not form a response. Vexus moved closer. Its arms extended. It said, a deviation from collective norms. You have bonded with predators. You have chosen chaos over structure. Rin pressed harder against the bulkhead. Its crystal scraped against the metal. A thin line of dust floated away from the contact point. Vexus interpreted the silence as defiance. It said, the collective cannot model your behavior. You have introduced variables we cannot account for. Variable removal is the only logical response. A hatch opened behind Vexus. A human entered. Sergeant Theron Kade gripped the frame with one hand. His boots were magnetic. They clicked against the metal as he pulled himself into the sector. His weapon was drawn. His eyes found Rin first, then Vexus. Vexus studied him. 7-faceted eyes tracked the human's movement. It said, you are one soldier. Its voice carried no emotion. Kade did not respond. Vexus said, I control this station. You cannot stop me. Its tone was flat, confident. Kade said nothing. He pushed off the hatch frame. His body crossed the maintenance sector in a single controlled arc. His boots hit the far wall. He positioned himself between Vexus and Rin. His weapon was drawn but not raised. Vexus reached for Rin with one crystalline arm. The weapon fired, a sharp crack that echoed off the metal walls. The round passed through Vexus's arm and shattered a section of crystal. Fragments floated into the darkness like frozen light. The arm withdrew. Vexus made a sound, not pain. The Korth did not feel pain in the human sense, but a sound of extreme systems disruption. Internal structures realigned, damaged pathways rerouted. The arm hung useless. Crystal dust drifted from the fracture point. Vexus looked at its shattered arm. It looked at Kade. It looked at Rin. The juvenile had moved. Its small crystal body pushed away from the bulkhead. It floated toward Kade, its arms wrapped around the human's torso. Its crystal pulses slowed. The panic faded. Rin pressed its face against Kade's chest plate. The human's arm came around the child, protective, possessive. Vexus processed the scene. Its analytical framework ran the data. A human had injured a Korth to protect a Korth juvenile. The juvenile had chosen the human over its own collective. The human had not spoken. The human had not negotiated. The human had simply acted. No hesitation, no calculation, no model. The framework collapsed. Vexus had no model for this. It had never not had a model. Every interaction, every observation. Every decision fit into a structure built over cycles of careful analysis. The collective understood patterns. The collective predicted outcomes. The collective controlled variables. This was not a variable. This was an event the framework could not contain. Vexus floated in the zero gravity. Its shattered arm drifted beside it. Its eyes tracked Kade as the human pulled Rin toward the maintenance hatch. The child's crystal pulses were calm now, regular, safe. Kade did not look back. He sealed the hatch behind them. Vexus was alone. Its internal systems rebooted. The disruption from the weapon's impact resolved. Pathways reestablished. Function returned, but the framework did not rebuild. The gap remained, an empty space where certainty had lived. Vexus opened a channel to the shadow network. It said the variable removal has failed. The network's reply came immediately. A single transmission, final, unforgiving. It said you have become a variable. The channel closed. Vexus floated in the cold stillness. The emergency strips cast thin blue light across drifting crystal fragments. No air movement, no vibration, no sound except the low hum of the station's systems running on Vexus's commands. It had never not known what to do. Now it knew nothing. The darkness pressed in. The fragments of its arm drifted past its field of vision. Frozen light, shattered structure, evidence of an event its framework could not contain. Something moved in the dark. Vexus turned. No one was there. The maintenance sector remained empty, but the sensation persisted. The sense that it was no longer alone, that something had changed in the space around it, that the rules had shifted and Vexus had not been informed. The shadow network had marked it. Vexus understood now what the humans called fear, not the word, not the concept. The experience, the system's disruption of encountering a threat your framework could not process, the collapse of certainty. The hollow space where control had lived, Vexus floated and waited. The hunter had become the target. The medical bay hummed with a low, steady frequency. The sound buried itself in the bones and promised safety. Artificial gravity pulled at Isabel Reyes with a familiar weight, but it was weak, 80%. Everything on the station felt slightly off balance now. Rin sat on the biobed. Its crystal structure pulsed slowly. Each pulse of internal light traveled from the juvenile's core outward along its 7 facets. The rhythm was calm. Reyes ran the handheld scanner over Rin's surface for the 3rd time. The readings were clean. No microfractures, no energy bleed, no structural damage. She exhaled, set the scanner down on the counter. The plastic clattered against the metal surface. She turned back to Rin and touched its surface lightly with her fingers. The gesture was unconscious. It was the same motion she would use to smooth a child's hair after a nightmare. She did not realize she had done it until she saw her own hand resting against the crystal. Azurk stood across the room. Its 7 arms were folded against its torso. Light bent through its core in slow, deliberate pulses. It watched Reyes with an intensity that felt physical. Azurk spoke. Its voice was low. It said, "You are bonded." Reyes looked up. Her hand did not move from Rin's surface. She looked at Azurk's. She looked at her own fingers pressed against the cool crystal. She did not deny it. The door to the medical bay hissed open. Commander Conrad stepped through. His face was pale. The gray in his hair seemed darker than it had been that morning. He stopped beside Kade. Kade still stood by the door with his arms crossed. Conrad looked at Rin first, then at Reyes, then at Azurk's. He said, "Where is Vexus?" His voice was flat. Azurk's crystal pulse flickered. It said, "Gone dark. The shadow network has cut contact. I believe Vexus has been eliminated by its own collective. This is standard procedure for variables that fail. Conrad's jaw tightened. He said, variable, you mean a person. Azurx did not respond. The silence in the room stretched. The equipment hum filled the space. Conrad said, what happens next? His tone was heavy. Azurx's arms shifted. The movement was slow, calculated. It said, I do not have an answer. The collective's internal structure is in disarray. The shadow network has been exposed to the Central Council. The Council did not know the full extent of its operations. They are assessing. Reyes heard the hesitation in Azurx's voice. It was the first time she had heard uncertainty from a Korth. The sound was wrong. It did not fit. Rin made a harmonic pattern. The sound vibrated through the air. The low tones built into a question that Reyes had learned to translate. What happens to me? The question was directed at Reyes. She felt the weight of it settle on her chest. She looked at Conrad. Conrad looked at Azurx. Azurx's light pulsed faster. No one answered. Reyes turned to Azurx. She said, what did the collective fear most? Her voice was quiet. Azurx was still for a long moment. The equipment hum filled the silence. The antiseptic smell pressed against the back of Reyes' throat. Azurx spoke. Its voice was flat, clinical. It said, we feared that humans would not follow the rules, that you would form bonds we could not model, that you would fight for each other in ways that made no tactical sense. You have done all of these things. It paused. The light in its core flickered. It said, the collective is not afraid of your weapons. It is afraid of your capacity for love. Reyes looked at Rin. The juvenile's crystal pulse was steady. Its internal light was calm. It watched her with the same trust a human child would show a parent. She looked at Kade. He stood by the door, his scarred jaw tight, his eyes fixed on Rin. He had shattered a Korth's arm to protect a child of another species. He would do it again. She looked at Conrad. He was reading a message on his console. His face changed. The lines around his eyes deepened. He said, we have a message from the Korth Collective's Central Council. The room went still. Conrad read aloud. His voice was flat, controlled. He said they request a negotiation, no extraction quotas, no occupation terms, a true treaty. He looked up. He looked at Azurx. Azurx's crystal pulse was faster than Reyes had ever seen it. The light moved through its core in rapid waves. It said, this has never happened before. The collective does not negotiate. Conrad did not reply. He stood in the middle of the medical bay, the message light still glowing on his console. His mouth opened, then closed. He had no idea what to say. Rin chimed. The harmonic pattern was simple, clear. It was the same question asked differently, can I stay? Reyes felt her hand press harder against Rin's surface. The crystal was cool against her palm. She did not look away from the juvenile. She said yes. The word hung in the air. It was not policy. It was not procedure. It was not authorized by any command structure in human space. It was the truth. Azurx watched her. Light pulsed through its core. It said the collective will not understand this. Reyes looked at Azurx. She did not blink. She said, I know. The console chirped again. A second message arrived. Conrad's fingers moved across the screen. His face tightened. He read it once. Then again, he said the Central Council has added a condition. They want Azurx to remain on Shardfall Station as the collective's permanent representative. Azurx's arms unfolded. Its crystal structure realigned with a sound like shifting gravel. It looked at Reyes. It looked at Rin. It said that is not standard procedure either. Reyes smiled, a small smile, exhausted, real. She said, welcome to the family. The medical bay fell silent. The equipment hummed. The air cycled. Rin's light pulsed steady and warm against Reyes' hand. Conrad closed his console. He looked at the people in the room. His shoulders did not roll. They just stayed still. He said, I need to draft a response. No one moved. The message waited on his console. The collective was ready to break 1,000 years of precedent. The occupation was still in place. Shardfall Station still floated above the Korth homeworld. But something had changed. Something that did not fit any model. Something that had no tactical explanation at all. The conference room on Shardfall Station was a box of cold light and silence. The blue-white glow from the Korth homeworld filled every corner. It washed the walls and the table and the faces of everyone seated around it. Commander Conrad kept his hands flat on the surface. The metal was cool against his palms. Across from him, the 3 Korth Council representatives had not moved since they entered. Their crystalline bodies were larger than Azurx. Deeper internal light patterns shifted slowly like distant storms. They watched him with the patient stillness of things that did not blink. The silent ones never blinked. Beside Conrad, Dr. Isabel Reyes had her datapad ready. Her fingers tapped against the edge of the device. A nervous rhythm. Conrad did not look at her. Behind him, Sergeant Theron Kade stood with his weapon holstered and his eyes fixed on the Korth delegates. Kade had not spoken since they entered. He did not need to. The senior council representative spoke. Its voice was a low harmonic that vibrated through the table. Conrad felt it in his chest. The sound was not language as humans produced it. It was resonance shaped into meaning. The light inside the representative pulsed slower as it spoke. It said, "We have reviewed the occupation data. We have reviewed the events of the past 3 standard days. Our models are inadequate." Conrad waited. He had learned that Korth negotiations required patience. The silence stretched. The blue-white light from the planet held steady. The representative continued. It said, "The collective cannot predict your species. This is not a failure we are accustomed to. We have determined that continued conflict is suboptimal." Conrad kept his face neutral. He said, "What are you proposing?" His voice was calm. The representative paused. Its internal light dimmed slightly. Then it said, "Full withdrawal, no resource extraction, no military presence. In exchange, we offer open trade and cultural exchange. A true partnership." Reyes shifted beside him. She did not interrupt. Conrad could feel the weight of the offer pressing against the table. Full withdrawal, no occupation, no extraction. Everything the original treaty was supposed to be. He said, "What changed?" His voice was quiet. The representative looked at Azurx. Azurx sat at the far end of the table, its 7 arms folded across its crystalline torso. Its internal pulse was steady but faster than before. The light moved through its core in quick ripples. The representative said, "Azurx represents a new variable. It has been absorbed into the Central Council. Its experience with your species has changed our understanding." The representative paused again. It spoke a word Conrad had never heard. A sound like crystal tapping against metal, stretched into 3 syllables. The resonance of it hung in the air. Azurx leaned forward. It said, "The word means something close to trust. The collective has no prior concept for it." Its voice was flat, analytical, but the light inside it moved faster. Conrad said, "Why?" He looked at Azurx. Azurx did not look away. It said, "Because Rin chose you. Rin is part of the collective. If Rin trusts you, the collective must learn to trust you. That is how we work." Its voice was flat, analytical, but the light inside it moved faster. It said, "You changed our structure from the inside. You did not conquer us. You adopted us." Conrad sat back in his chair. The metal frame creaked under his weight. He looked at the viewport. The Korth homeworld hung in the void, blue-white and patient. The light filled the room. He understood that the occupation was over, not because humanity lost, because humanity won in a way no one predicted. The war ended with a family. Conrad looked at Reyes. She was watching Azurx. Her hand had stopped tapping. She was still. He looked at Kade. The sergeant had not moved. His eyes were fixed on the Korth delegates, but there was something different in his posture, a shift in the shoulders, a loosening. Conrad turned back to the council representatives. He said, "When do you want the withdrawal to begin?" His voice was steady. The senior representative pulsed once. It said, "Immediately. Our ships will not fire. Our networks will not resist. You may leave without casualties." Conrad nodded. He stood slowly. He extended his hand across the table to the senior representative. The representative did not move. It stared at his outstretched hand. The light inside it flickered. It did not understand the gesture. Azurx stood. It stepped forward. Its 7 arms unfolded, one of them extended toward Conrad. The crystal at its tip was smooth and pale. The light inside it was steady. Conrad took the arm. The contact was cold, solid. The surface was hard and unyielding. It was not a human handshake. Conrad felt the resonance of Azurx's pulse through the crystal, a slow beat, steady. He looked at the representative. He said, "We accept your terms." The senior representative dipped forward once. A slow bow. Then it turned and left the room. The other 2 followed. Their crystal footfalls made no sound on the deck. Azurx remained. It looked at its own arm, still clasped in Conrad's hand. Then it looked at Conrad. Its voice was quieter now. It said, "I do not understand why you reached out." Conrad let go. He said, "Because I trust you." Azurx's pulse flickered. Then it steadied. It said, "I do not understand that either, but I am learning." Reyes stood. She walked to the viewport. Conrad followed her gaze. Outside the station, a small crystalline shape floated against the stars. Rin, the juvenile, was pressed against the glass, watching the room. Its crystal pulses were bright and steady. Conrad nodded once. Rin pulsed back, a flash of light. Then the juvenile pushed away from the station and drifted into the void, spinning slowly in the blue-white glow of its homeworld. Kade spoke for the first time. His voice was low. He said, "The kid is safe." Conrad did not look away from the viewport. He said, "Yes." Reyes turned to face him. Her eyes were wet. She did not wipe them. She said, "We actually did it." Conrad looked at her. He said, "No, we did something else. We made a family. That is what they could not predict. That is what ended the war." He turned to Ajax. He said, "You should come with me. There is a shuttle leaving in an hour. We have a lot of work to do." Ajax's pulse steadied. It said, "I will come." Conrad walked to the door. He paused. He looked at the viewport one more time. The Korth homeworld was bright and steady. The station hummed around him. The occupation was over. He stepped through the door. The blue-white light followed him into the corridor, but the light was different now. It carried the warmth of something new, an alliance built not on treaties but on trust, and the work was just beginning.